Today on Simply Happy Conversations, I'm talking with Leah from Goodness Greenness, a plant care and education business. She's a passionate gardener and horticulturist who's going to explain why you need to be surrounded by greenery indoors and give you top tips to keep your indoor plants thriving. Welcome, Leah.
Hi, Narelle. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no, it's such a pleasure to have you. Let's start with, if you were a Barbie doll, what two accessories would you come with? I'm already guessing I know one of those.
Yes, my favourite plant at the moment, which is a Monstera borsigiana. I'm really terrible with Latin names. This is my most expensive indoor plant, and it's my baby at the moment, and she's giving me a new leaf, as you can see, which I'm very excited about, and also a watering can.
Nice. I thought that. So tell us about that plant then. What makes it so expensive? Is it really hard to grow?
So anything that's variegated is quite trendy at the moment. So everyone wants variegated plants, and the more variegation on leaf, it's not so much that they're harder to grow, it's harder to get the variegation happening in a plant. Variegation is actually a fault in the plant. So if you see it in the wild, it's kind of like it's a fault in the plant system. So to breed and grow them successfully for market is actually quite tricky. So yeah, that's why it's so expensive mainly. Yeah.
And we always want things that are harder to get, aren't they? Don't we?
Definitely. And they're so pretty.
Yeah. That's the other thing. So does it have one white leaf at all? Like, could that possibly happen?
It could possibly happen. It could have a totally white leaf at some stage.
Yeah.
If you do, that's a bit of a unicorn and everyone's very excited. I've got other variegated plants. I've got a Syngonium fantasy that's thrown a pure white leaf. But yeah, that's not as unicorny because it's not as expensive and not as special, I guess. But mostly you get in the Borsigiana, you get the half moon, so half white leaf, yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
And so, people who are just listening, you're going to have to go and jump on YouTube so you can actually see the plant as well and see the leaves and what we're talking about.
For sure.
So if I was a professional, came to your house as a professional organiser, what area at the moment would you need some help organising?
Well, I'd love help with my kitchen cupboards, but I think actually organising my plants would be fantastic because I tend to attract plants. I don't know, people give them to me, I just find them, I buy them, and I end up with just a house full of plants, and I've run out of plant stands, I've run out of plant pots. So just being able to organise them a bit better would be nice and display them better. It's mainly because, my house we live in it, we don't have a showroom house. We just live in it, and there's cat towers and, cat toys everywhere. So it's hard to fit the plants in.
And so it's like looking at maybe other ways of displaying them, whether they could be hanging, some other storage ways of putting up plants.
I've got a hanger, but probably need more of them in every corner of the house.
Yeah.
I'm always looking for plant stand solutions. Yeah. I'm thinking about.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I saw one the other day. It was like a piece of wood that they got from Bunnings, and they had 2 bricks underneath it. So it was quite skinny, but not, and they'd sort of made it the length that they wanted. And then they had their pots on top, and then they had some of the little, so it just gave it that tiered variation so they could display them. I thought that was quite clever that they'd done it themselves as well.
Yeah, DIY's the best.
yeah, that was a good one. Sorry, I cut you off. What were you going to say?
Oh, no, I'm going to start thinking about making my own. So I've got some woodworking tools in the shed, and just thinking, how to structure them, because often when you buy shelves from, Bunnings or whatever, the space between the shelves isn't high enough for plants. So, you've got a bigger plant, you want a wider gap and everything. So, I'm thinking that might be the best way to do it.
That sounds like a great idea. So tell us about your strengths. What are your strengths that you bring to Goodness Greenness with helping people to also fall in love with plants? Because I love plants, but not everyone likes plants, do they?
No, they don't. And I think, if you want to love plants, but you think you're a black thumb, I can tell you now, you can turn that around. So I think one of my greatest strengths is just teaching people the tips and tricks to keep your plants healthy and happy. There's not that many that will actually, turn you around in terms of looking after plants. I do that with, being a friendly sort of face, going into a client's home and seeing, what they have and where they have them sitting. That's especially important with indoor plants. Getting to know them a bit and showing a bit of empathy and kindness and finding out, it helps me find out their tolerance for maintenance. So, if they've got a plant that I know is high maintenance, I'll be like, well, maybe you should replace that with a XYZ instead, because you can ignore that and neglect it a lot and still be happy. So, yeah, I think it's about getting to know your client so you can tailor what they need. Yeah.
Yeah. And then obviously your passion behind plants and the knowledge of plants is also a bonus, isn't it? Because I have come to you to get some advice on how to propagate a plant, and you were all over it. You knew everything.
Yeah, it's kind of a special interest. So, I deep dive on everything and it just sticks in my head. So, yeah, if you ask me a question, I will not give you a short answer.
Which is what you want when you're coming and wanting information about plants. So that's definitely one of your strengths. So then, as an expert who's passionate about plant care and education to help us find that green thumb, then what are the benefits of us having plants in our house or in the indoor of our home?
Oh, there's so many wonderful benefits, and most of them are, I think, aesthetic. Having beautiful things to look at really does lift your mood and make you feel at home and make you feel cozy and comfortable in your own space. But I guess gardening's like any hobby, it's helps with serotonin and dopamine levels. So it's great for us ADHDers. And it's a great mindfulness practice too. So, last year I repotted 250 indoor plants for a client. And that was a big job, but it's just the repetition. Once you get it's sort of like a procession line happening, you just get into the mindfulness of it and, keep going. But there's actually research around the soil bacteria called Mycobacterium vaccae. So it's a bacteria, a good bacteria that's in soil that actually triggers the release of serotonin in our brain. So actually getting your hands dirty in good quality soil is actually really good for you. So, obviously there are some risks with handling certain types of gardening products. So, I wouldn't recommend that. For even potting mix can be hazardous, breathing in the little things that fly out, and so you've got to be careful. But getting out in the garden, planting your seeds, digging up weeds, getting your hands dirty is really good for you. And
I completely relate to that, because all of a sudden sometimes I'll be just like, I've got to plant my plants, I've got to repot someone and do something. And my husband's sort of like, why are you doing it right now? And I'm like, I don't know. I just have this feeling I need to touch the dirt. That's what it is. And
I have that. Yeah, I definitely have that. I haven't touched dirt in a couple of weeks now because I haven't had to repot anything lately, but I do have something I want to put up today, so I'm going to go out and get my hands in the dirt. The other benefits, of course, are that plants clean our air. So through photosynthesis, a process where plants take in carbon dioxide and put out oxygen. It's great for your health in that way too. But like I said at the start, plants just look beautiful. You can style them to your house. You can choose plants that suit your house. If you've got a modern house, you might want to choose something like this sort of structural plant, which is a euphorbia, and lives quite happily indoors, or a sansevieria or something like that. If you've got a more boho feel, you might want, some maidenhair ferns or some monstera, soft sort of floaty foliage. There's just so many options.
Oh, I love that. That's the bit that I love, that you can actually use the plants as part of that theme of the room and as well, and create that atmosphere through plants. And
Yeah.
definitely the greenery. It's so funny when I take all my plants outside to water them and my kids will come into the room and they'll be like, Mum, what happened? Why it looks so bare? What's
Yeah.
happened to the room? It's just like that greenery is actually really inviting for everybody. And you really notice it when you do take them all out and you have none at all.
Yeah,
So
you
yeah, definitely. Yeah, just love to be able to see them and add that extra bit of decor just through a plant.
Yeah.
So what are some of your tips around looking after plants then?
Oh,
Especially apart from watering, because obviously watering's obvious, but
yeah.
what other things do we really need to do?
Cool. I will talk about watering because that is really important.
Yep.
But so the first thing is do your research before you buy. So if you bring home a plant that looks amazing in the nursery or in the indoor plant shop, that's because it's come straight from a propagation nursery where it's been grown in its ideal environment. So it's going to look perfect and beautiful. If you're bringing that home to your house, which is doesn't get as much light, is not as humid, is drier, that plant won't last very long. It's not your fault. It's just the fact that you don't have the right environment for that particular plant. That's something that the salespeople won't tell you because they want you to buy the plant, of course.
Yep.
So I would suggest do some research. You might have seen a plant. Don't buy it straight away. Go home, Google, find out what kind of growing conditions it likes. Now, of course, we're not expecting it to be, the perfect environment. Like, you don't want to, you're not going to live in a house that feels like a jungle, of course. But say, for instance, I do have some tips here. So here in Victoria, we're in pretty cooler climate environment. So things like calatheas and alocasias don't do really well here. So a lot of people love the look of them because they're so beautiful. Bring them home. They might last a couple of months and then they just start dying. Yeah. I'm lucky I've got a little grow house inside. So I will put my alocasias and calatheas in that for the humidity for a week or so, bring it back out again, and it's okay for another couple of weeks. Do your research. That's the first thing. Number 2 is also thinking about your tolerance for maintenance. So you don't want to buy something if you're time poor, you've got no time for, fussing around a plant. Don't buy a maidenhair fern or even a fiddle leaf fig because they're notoriously fussy. If you can't be bothered, don't do it. So, get something really hardy. Like I said, these euphorbias, they grow really well indoors. Any kind of cactus can grow well indoors. There's some philodendron species like a Rojo Congo. They're pretty low maintenance. Actually, most Monstera and philodendron are pretty low maintenance. Ripsalis and ZZ plants, which hate water. So you can leave them for months without a drop of water and they will be happy.
That's my go-to present to a friend who doesn't will probably not remember to water it. And it's amazing how they do last.
Oh, it's incredible. My next tip is about watering. So a lot of people kill their plants by overwatering. My biggest tip is let the soil in the pot dry out totally before you water again. Most plants do not like having wet feet. They hate sitting in water. So if you've got your indoor plants, this is what I would suggest. You plant your indoor plants in a plastic nursery pot that sits inside the decorative pot. So then you can take this out, water it on the sink or whatever, and let it drain fully before you pop it back in there, and then it's not going to sit in water. But if your plant's looking a bit sad or whatever, doesn't mean it needs watering. So if the soil's still wet, there's something else going on. Could be needs a feed, could be it needs repotting, could be it's got a disease. There's a whole myriad of things it could be, but it's probably not watering. So watering is a lot of people kill with kindness, I guess, when it comes to watering. The other tip is you can actually clean your plant's leaves with with just a damp, soft cloth. Especially if you've got pets in your house, which I do, they often get covered in a layer of dust and then cat hair. And that can interfere with photosynthesis. So if you wipe your leaves regularly, that can help your plants thrive.
Can you use coconut oil?
Ooh, that's a good question. I've never heard that. I would.
Yeah. So maybe not. I have been, but I was like, because someone told me.
I do use a neem spray that I buy from one of my suppliers, which also helps with pest control as well. It smells beautiful. It's a natural oil, and it actually, adds a lovely sheen to your plant's foliage. So but if coconut oil's working.
Oh no, I like the thought that it might also protect from pests as well, because that's good. Yeah.
So the last tip is about soil health. So if you think about how a plant grows, obviously the foliage is really important, but what's underneath the soil is super important. And so what those roots are in is incredibly important. So my biggest tip is that to keep in mind that potting mix only has a shelf life really of about a year. So if you've got plants that have been in the soil in the same soil for more than a year, it's really time to repot. Yeah, that just doesn't last. It doesn't hold the nutrients that the roots will need to fuel the foliage development. And also when you're repotting, don't just use straight potting mix. So with indoor plants, most of them love to have really good drainage. So you want to get a bit of chunk into the soil. You don't want the soil compacting around the roots. You want that oxygen around the roots to help the plant grow. So I do a mix of about 50-60% premium potting mix, always buy the most expensive. I know that's not great for the pocket, but don't buy the cheap one because it's worth your investment in that. So about 60% of good quality potting mix, about 30-40% of sort of like an orchid bark. So there's that chunkiness in the soil. And then the rest I put in perlite, which also helps aerate the soil, but also helps with moisture retention, but not in a really clogged way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So then you just mix all that together and then, have your little potting system going to do that. That's so funny about the potting mix. My husband the other week when I said, could you get some potting mix for this fiddle fig that I wanted to do? And he came home and he goes, oh, I got this one. It was really cheap. It was on sale. I was like, oh, right, okay. I didn't use it. I went outside later when he wasn't looking and put it just into our garden. And I actually had to go get another one. I was just like, I'm not going to use that. I want this plant to last. And you've bought the cheapest possible potting mix you could find.
Exactly. Well, if you, potting mix is usually made, it's not actually soil usually. It's usually a mix of ground up bark and tree offcuts and stuff that's ground up really finely with some additions of fertilizer if you buy the expensive stuff. So if you think about it like that, there's not much nutrient in that. You need to keep fertilizing as well. So
so tell us about fertilizers. What do we need to do around that area with our plants?
Well, I fertilize pretty much monthly.
Yep.
In the growing season, it's a bit more. You can back off a bit in winter. So I'll start fertilising mine now. We're getting into the warmer months because it's the growing season. They need more energy. I usually do it every 2 weeks in warmer weather. My big tip around fertiliser is if you're fertilising indoor plants in pots, using a liquid fertiliser is usually the best way because it's taken up much quicker by the plant. And because you're watering indoor plants more often because they're in pots and not in a large body of soil, you'll be washing out those nutrients more often. So that's why they need more frequent fertilising.
That makes sense.
But you always need to, check the plant genus and species, check the back of your fertilizer packet for instructions, do some research on what needs what. And sometimes you learn by trial and error as well. I've got a heap of epipremnums that I love, but they were really struggling, and I realised I wasn't watering enough. I was actually letting them go too long and letting them dry out too much, but I wasn't fertilizing as well. And then once I upped the fertilizer, they just took off.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it can seem easy to kill a plant, but if you have a few of these little tips, it's actually not that easy to kill a plant.
Yeah. Do you know what I have done too, is what I've found has helped me to get into it, is having a few of the same particular plant, but in different areas of my home, and then watching to see what happens, like going, because I've got seriously one room that nearly every plant loves the most.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the house, because there's dark areas and they don't get necessarily the sun, that not too many like it. And so they're my ones that I really struggle to keep plants alive, and different times of the year as well, because of the sun. That's been really good for me, is that having the same plant, but in different areas, so you can sort of work out where it works best, rather than then be so disappointed that that plant just died. And
exactly.
And then you don't know what was it that killed it. Was it the darkness or the light? Or
Oh, I highly recommend that as a tip. That is a great thing that you just brought up, because a lot of people ask indoor plant gardeners, what's the best plant for a dark room? And I always say, no plants like dark rooms.
Okay.
A plant can survive in a dark room for a little while. It won't survive there forever. So what I say is, if you want something in a dark room, that's fine. Just swap it out. So rotate it around your house, like you just said. So I've got a philodendron birkin in my bedroom, which gets filtered dim light. It won't survive there for much longer. It's been there for a couple of months. I'll bring it out. I'll sit it somewhere. I'll probably put it in my grow house for a month or so, just to give it a bit of perk up, put something else in there to take its place for the month. And the same with you, if you, like what you said about experimenting with different places in your house. Yeah, that's a great way to find the best place for the best plant, I guess. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. And then it is the ones that are great and grow the most, they're the ones you get the cuttings off, and at the moment I have too many of a certain type, because they obviously thrive in all the other areas of the home compared to the nice sunny room. So yeah. But it's good. It's been really good way of testing it out and trialing, especially taking cuttings. So have you got a quick tip around cuttings, what people can do?
Yes, I do. So with cuttings, you must always get a node. If you don't know what a node is, I'm just trying to find. Okay, so this is a Monstera Thai constellation. So a node is like the bump on the stem where the leaf comes out. So above ground, a node will put out a leaf. Below ground, it'll put out a root. So my preferred method of propagating from cuttings is the water method. I would just cut that off there underneath a node and pop that node in some water. I usually use a glass vessel so the light is getting onto the node. And pop in a few little fertilizer pellets, sort of like a slow release fertilizer that can help with root growth. Just check the back of your packet for the nutrients in that particular one. And Bob's your uncle. No, they don't all work. Propagation's a bit hit and miss, depending on the time of year, the temperature of the season, where you've placed the cutting, how often you water it. Some of them just rot and die. That happens. But if you're keen to get as many cuttings as possible, as many plants as possible, take more than one cutting. That's another big tip, because, they don't all work.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, and I love that. I just put it in water and have them around the windowsills and different parts of the home. And
Yeah,
as soon
and
as
they
you
look
see those roots, it's like they look good too, don't they?
they do look good. And I always collect like pretty little glass vessels in op shops and stuff for that.
Yeah.
So I've got little, yeah, so they look pretty as they're propagating. So yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah, that's a great tip for people. So to finish up, what easy care plant would you recommend for the listeners to start with?
Well, the number one suggestion would be the peace lily, which
Yep.
isn't actually a lily, by the way. It's the genus is Spathiphyllum. Everyone knows what a peace lily is. I've got quite a few, but I haven't got one to just show you. They're very forgiving. They're easy care because they usually tell you when they want to drink. I can leave mine probably a month and they're fine. Then they start wilting. You give them a drink and they're fine again. You can also get Spathiphyllum in variegated versions. There's one called Picasso, which has more white on its leaves, like this one. But I've also got a. Did I just say domino?
No, the peace lily.
Yeah. So the
Yeah.
other one's a domino, and it's more
Yeah.
a speckled white
Oh,
and
yeah.
green. They put out the flowers that are really gorgeous, that kind of look like an anthurium flower, and they will be prompted to flower. This is my tip for flowering. If you pop them in a dark spot for a month or so, that triggers a hormone in them that sends out flowers, apparently, and then you can bring them back out. So their leaves are usually really glossy and beautiful. So even if they have no flowers, they look really good as well.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's a good tip. Peace lily, that's so interesting because I do have a few. And as soon as I find in my house, they're really greedy for water. So if I don't water it once a week, it's just, it looks like it's dead. And then it's like a bit of water and it's back and it's alive and so they are very forgiving. But ours in this house seem to need, maybe I just have them in hot areas of the home and near the windows. Yeah, they just need water more often.
And they have quite a big root system. So if you think about it, they like to be packed into the pot. So the roots will be taking up all the room and sucking all that moisture up. So they'll, need watering more often. Yeah.
Yeah. And what about ones then, a plant for someone who does, they struggle with watering?
Definitely cactus. And these euphorbias, they're just, I don't know, some people don't like the prickly sort of structural plants. I love them. So that's just my preference. But there's some really gorgeous colours. Like you can't really see it but it's got sort of red tips on it. That I haven't watered that in a month at least, and I can see that the soil's still a bit damp, so I won't water that again for probably another month. What else? Oh, these dracaenas, they're pretty easy care, don't need much water. If you water them too much, they'll rot from the roots. What else? There's so many. But I like the sansevieras. So this is a sansevieria as well, but it's the mother-in-law tongue.
Yes, yeah.
So here's my mother-in-law tongue, which is a slightly different species. It's a bit darker in colour, but you can get lots of different colours and patterns. These are tough as and hate too much water.
Yeah. So then what about, do you have a tip around then remembering to water the plants? Like, obviously, from what I've picked up from you, just this conversation, is it's more about looking at the soil. So you don't necessarily have a routine where you're like, okay, everyone's out on Sunday and we need to water you all. You're more like,
definitely
each
not.
Okay.
You need to check the soil before you water. So I have a moisture meter. Usually I can tell by sticking my finger in the soil and digging around. But the moisture meters actually have a probe. I should have had one to show you, but they have long skewer, a long metal skewer that goes down into the soil, and it tells you the little meter goes up and down. So if it's dry, medium, or wet. And you don't want to water until the needle's right sort of down near dry.
Okay.
Although some plants, like I said, the spathiphyllum might still have some dampness in the soil, but is wilting and telling you it needs a drink. So,
yeah,
you need to sort of put all the pieces together before you, make a decision on watering. But for me, I check the soil first. There are some plants that I set reminders for, like a fiddle leaf fig. I have a reminder in my phone to water that regularly on a Sunday. I know
yes, because that's the other trick, isn't it? They have to be watered at the same time on the same day.
Yes.
Otherwise, and you know what? When I started doing that a few years back, I have got this one that's amazing that I've taken cuttings from. Oh, it actually grows babies out the bottom. That's how good it is. This is the first time I've taken the top out, but it, the like reminder around that is I just do it as soon as I do it. That like on the Sunday, usually mine is in the afternoon. It's been perfect. It's been the best plan I've had. It's probably my easiest, but then everyone else gets watered because of that one. And more so than looking at the dirt.
Yes. That's fine too, though. I mean, if your plants are still surviving, like you've got to think about too how big the pot is, because the smaller the pot, the quicker it'll dry out, the more it'll need watering. So that's another tip. But with fiddle leaves, like people notoriously kill them. But I grew this one from a baby that was about this big.
Yep.
And that's the other tip. With fiddle leaves is that they hate drafts. So always put it in a really sheltered area in your home. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, so how can people connect with you? And if they need help, Goodness Greenness, they need some help with repotting, which is a great tip because I'm sure there's people out there who are like, it's almost like I feel like our services are very married together because it's like you're going to have people who are like, I don't have time and energy to repot, but I love having all the plants. A bit like in their home, they want the things, but they don't have time to organize it. And also around that, what's the best ones for your actual space that's going to, invigorate the space or maybe match the decor that you've got. So how can people connect with you?
The best way is on Instagram. So my handle is just @goodness.greenness. So, I'm on there all the time and there's links to my website and, you can get in touch with me there.
And can people also get like some sort of advice, like you could do an advice session and do it virtually as well?
Yep, I do that. So I can chat to you on the phone or a Zoom call or even if it's just via Messenger. Yep, I can do that as well. So whatever suits you.
Oh, Leah, thank you so much for your tips. I'm going out this afternoon to go to Bunnings to get one of those water meters already. Yes.
They're fantastic.
And definitely doing my repotting. I think it's September, October. I'm going to plan that in the school holidays because I'm pretty sure they all need new soil.
You can usually tell when the soil gets really sort of grey and dusty.
Okay. Oh, no, they're not that point.
That's really good.
Thank you so much, Leah.
Oh, no worries. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Narelle.